She looked at my hands before she looked at my face. That's the first thing I remember about Miriam Ashford. The way her eyes dropped to my knuckles, the grease that never fully washes out, the scar along my left thumb from a table saw when I was 19, and the way something in her expression shifted. Not disgust exactly, more like confirmation, like she'd already made up her mind about me and my hands just proved she was right. "You're the piano man," she said. It wasn't a question. I told her I was. "Dale's Restoration, that's my shop out of Knoxville. We do uprights, spinnets, baby grands. Occasionally something bigger. I'd been doing it for 11 years. First out of my garage, then out of a proper space on Merchant Street after the work got steadier. I wasn't famous. I wasn't the guy you called if you wanted a Steinway concert grand rebuilt from the case up. But I was good, and people in East Tennessee knew it, and sometimes word travels. Word had traveled to Miriam Ashford. Her estate sat on 40 acres outside Maryville, about 25 minutes south of my shop. I'd driven past the gate on 321 100 times without ever thinking about what was behind it. Iron posts, old stone, the kind of entrance that doesn't need a sign because the people who need to know already know. The housekeeper had called me on a Thursday. The appointment was set for the following Monday. I showed up in my work truck, which had a dent in the rear panel and a child's soccer cleat wedged under the passenger seat, and I drove up a gravel lane lined with dogwood trees that had just started to go gold. My son, Eli, was 8 years old. He was with my mother that morning. Every Monday he was with my mother, because Mondays were when I took jobs that required more than a few hours, and Eli needed someone steady while I worked. His mother had left when he was 3. That's a long story and not the one I'm telling right now. The short version is that it was just the two of us, and we were okay. Not rich, not struggling. Okay. I drove a truck with a dent in it, and I made enough to keep the lights on and put money away for Eli's college, and I didn't spend much time thinking about what I didn't have. The piano was in a room at the back of the house. Miriam walked me through herself, not the housekeeper. She was in her late 60s, I guessed. Silver hair pulled tight, a silk blouse the color of winter wheat, posture like she'd been told once to stand straight and had never once stopped. The house was the kind of house where your footsteps sounded different, where the air itself felt quieter. "It was my daughter's," she said when we reached the room. The piano was a 1927 Mason & Hamlin Model AA mahogany case with carved legs. Someone had loved it once. That much was obvious from the wear pattern on the keys. The middle register softened from years of daily use, the bench cushion shaped to a body that had sat there often and long. But it had been neglected for some time. The finish was dull. 2 keys were sticking. The soundboard had developed a crack along the treble bridge. I crouched down to look underneath. I asked how long it had been since it was tuned. 7 years, Miriam said. I looked up at her. "My daughter passed," she said, in the tone people use when they've said those words so many times they've learned to say them without breaking. She was 34. I stood up slowly. I told her I was sorry. Miriam looked at the piano the way you look at something you can't decide whether to keep or let go of. "I want it restored, fully. I want it to sound the way it did when she played it." She paused. "Can you do that?" I told her I could try, that I'd need to take some measurements, do an assessment, give her a quote. She nodded once, like that was acceptable, and left me alone in the room. Her name had been Claire. I learned that from the housekeeper, a woman named Dottie, who'd been with the family for over 20 years, and who spoke about Claire the way you speak about a season that was particularly good, with warmth and the knowledge that it's over. Claire had started playing at 4, had been accepted to a conservatory in Cincinnati at 17, had come home at 20 when her father got sick, and had never quite made it back to music the way she'd planned. She'd married a man from Chattanooga. They'd had 2 kids. She'd died of a brain aneurysm on a Tuesday morning while her children were at school, and there had been nothing slow about it, nothing that gave anyone time to prepare. Her mother had closed the piano room 3 days after the funeral and hadn't opened it in 7 years. I didn't know any of this on that first Monday. I found it out over the weeks that followed, piece by piece, the way you learn things when you keep showing up to the same house and the people inside it start to forget to be formal with you. The restoration was going to take time. The soundboard crack alone was a significant repair. I'd need to clean the plate, repin the strings, do the crack repair with a carbon fiber patch. then recondition the hammers and regulate the action before I could even begin thinking about tone. Miriam accepted my quote without negotiating. I'd been prepared to talk her through it line by line. She just looked at the number, looked at me, and said, "Fine. When can you start?" "The following week." I said I could start the following week. She nodded that same single nod. "Don't rush it," she said. And then she left. I came every Tuesday and Thursday for the next 2 months. Sometimes Dottie would bring me coffee without being asked. Sometimes Miriam would appear in the doorway of the piano room and watch me work without saying anything. I'd learned not to be bothered by it. There are people who watch when they're lonely, and people who watch when they're suspicious, and I could tell after the 3rd or 4th visit that Miriam was the first kind. Eli had a school project due in October, a report on a historical figure. He chose Louis Armstrong because he'd heard one of his records at my mother's house and decided the man looked like somebody worth knowing about. I helped him with it on Sunday nights, spread out on the kitchen floor with index cards and library books. He had a habit of asking questions completely sideways. Not what did Louis Armstrong do, but did he ever get tired of being famous? I never knew how to answer those. I just tried to be honest with him. There's something about having a kid that changes the way you look at other people's grief. When Claire's daughter, her name was Nadia, she was 12. When Nadia came home from school one Thursday afternoon and walked through the piano room doorway and stopped cold when she saw me kneeling beside the opened case, I understood exactly what was happening on her face. She'd forgotten the piano was being worked on. She'd walked in without thinking, the way you walk into rooms in your own house, and then she'd been ambushed by the sight of it. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't know anyone was in here." I told her she didn't need to apologize, that it was her house. She looked at the piano for a moment. "Is it going to sound the same?" I told her it was going to sound as close to the same as I could make it. She thought about that. "My mom used to play with the windows open in the summer," she said. "Even when it was hot, she said the music needed somewhere to go." She left before I could respond. I sat with that for a while after she was gone. The music needed somewhere to go. I thought about the kind of woman who would think of it that way, and about what it must be like to grow up with a mother who said things like that, and then not have her anymore at 12 years old. I drove home that afternoon thinking about Eli. It was the 4th week of November when I found the envelope. I'd been removing the action to clean the key bed. It's painstaking work, 88 individual keys, each one lifted and set aside. And underneath key 37, wedged in a gap between the key bed rail and the wooden frame, there was a small folded piece of paper. Not a letter, more like a note. It had been there a long time. The paper had taken on the color of old cream, and the fold lines were deep and permanent. I almost set it aside. It wasn't unusual to find things inside old pianos. Piano technicians joke about it, the coins and pencils and childhood treasures that fall between keys over the decades. But something about the way this was folded, deliberately, precisely, not dropped but placed, made me stop. I didn't open it. That felt important. It wasn't mine. I set it on the bench and kept working. When Miriam appeared in the doorway an hour later, I pointed to it. I told her I'd found it under the keys. I told her I hadn't looked at it. She crossed the room slowly, picked it up and stood there holding it for a long moment before she unfolded it. I pretended to be very interested in the key bed rail. I listened to the silence. Then she made a sound I wasn't expecting. Not a sob, something quieter than that. A sharp inhale like cold water. I looked up. She was sitting on the bench now, though I hadn't heard her sit. The note was open in her hands, and she was staring at it, and her face had changed completely. All the architecture of it, the held posture, the careful eyes, had come down. "It's her handwriting," she said. I didn't say anything. She must have. Miriam stopped, pressed her lips together, tried again when Claire was 17. Before she left for the conservatory. She used to. She had a habit of writing things down and hiding them, in books in drawers. She called them her time capsules. A long pause. I thought I'd found them all. She read it again. I could tell from the way her eyes moved, slow, careful, like she was memorizing every word. Then she folded it again, along the same lines, and held it in both hands in her lap. "She says she's not afraid," Miriam said finally. "She says she wrote this before she left for Cincinnati. She says she knows she's supposed to be afraid, leaving home for the first time, but that when she sits at this piano, she isn't. She says the piano is the one place where she always knows who she is. A breath. She says she hopes she remembers that when things get hard. The room was very quiet. She did, Miriam said. For a long time she did. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. There are moments when the right thing is just to stay in the room, and I've learned, slowly, imperfectly, that I can usually tell which moments those are. After a while, Miriam stood up. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "How much longer?" she asked. The question was about the piano. I told her 4 more sessions, probably, give or take. She nodded. She started to leave, then stopped in the doorway. "My son-in-law thinks I should sell it," she said. "The piano. He thinks it's not good for the children to have it in the house. A constant reminder." I didn't have a response to that. It wasn't my place. "He's not wrong," she said. "He's also not right." She looked back at the piano one more time. Some things need to be remembered, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. She walked out. I finished the restoration the 2nd week of December. It took me a full session just for the final regulation and voicing, shaping the hammers, adjusting the let-off, checking the repetition springs. I'm particular about that last stage. Anybody can fix the mechanics. The voicing is where you find out if the piano has something left in it, or if it's just going to make sound. This piano had something left in it. I played a simple scale when I was done. Middle register first, then up, then down into the bass. Clear and warm and even, with a depth in the low strings that I don't often hear in instruments this old. It was a good piano. It had always been a good piano. It had just needed someone to pay attention. Dottie came to listen from the hallway. She didn't say anything, just stood there with her hands folded. I was packing up my tools when Miriam came in with Nadia. The girl stopped when she heard it. I'd been playing a simple C major chord to check the sustain, and she looked at her grandmother. "Sit down," Miriam told her. Nadia sat on the bench. She hadn't played since her mother died. I knew this from Dottie. She put her hands on the keys and they stayed there, not pressing, just resting, like she was checking whether the temperature was right. Then she played one note, middle C. It rang out clean and full and hung in the air of that room. Nadia didn't say anything, but she pressed it again. I finished closing my kit. I didn't look up. Some moments belong to other people, and the best thing you can do is give them room. Miriam walked me out to my truck. This she hadn't done before. Usually Dottie handled the goodbyes, and Miriam was a presence you felt inside the house but not outside it, not in the cold December air. She had her arms crossed against the wind. She looked smaller outside, which is something I've noticed about people who are very much themselves in a particular place. Take them out of it and something shifts. "You're good at this," she said. I told her I'd been doing it a long time. "That's not what I mean." She looked at my truck, then back at me. "You were careful with this house, with what was in it." A pause. "I've had other craftsmen in. Some of them don't. They don't understand that a house like this isn't just a house, that what's here matters." I told her that I understood it was her daughter's piano. "It's more than that," she said. And then she didn't explain what she meant, which I think was exactly right. We stood there for a moment. "Your son," she said. "Dottie mentioned you have a boy." I told her I did. 8 years old. Named Eli. "You're raising him alone?" I said mostly yes, my mother helped. She looked at me for a long moment. I'd gotten used to those looks over the past 2 months. The assessments, the pauses. I didn't take it personally anymore. Miriam Ashford processed people carefully, and I'd come to think that was probably a reasonable way to move through the world when you'd lost what she'd lost. "I had a son too," she said. "He lives in Portland now. We don't speak often." She said it plainly. No drama in it, just the weight of the fact. I nodded. "Don't do that," she said. "Whatever happens, don't let time do that. Don't let the quiet grow long enough to become permanent." It wasn't advice exactly. It wasn't directed at me in any specific way. It was more like something she'd been carrying for a long time that had finally found a place to set down. I told her I'd try. She handed me the final payment in an envelope. Then she pulled something from her coat pocket, the folded note, the one from the piano. "I want you to have this," she said. I looked at her. "Not to keep, to read. And then to give back to Nadia when she's older. Dottie will know when." I didn't fully understand. I said as much. I don't know how much time I have," she said quietly, not asking for sympathy, just stating a fact. "There are things I can control. The note gets to Nadia. I just need someone outside this house to be the keeper of it for a while. Someone I trust to be careful. I took it. I held it with both hands, the way she had. She looked at me for one more moment, and in it there was something that wasn't gratitude exactly, but was close to it. An acknowledgement between two people who've both spent a lot of time doing quiet, necessary work and knowing that most of it goes unseen. "Tell your son," she said, "that the work a man does with his hands is not small." Then she turned and walked back toward the house. I drove home with the heat on and the radio off. The note was in the breast pocket of my jacket, right against my chest. Eli was at the kitchen table when I got home, working on a word search my mother had printed off for him. He looked up and said, "Did you fix it?" I told him I did. He thought about that with the serious expression he gets when he's deciding whether something matters. "Will someone play it now?" I said I thought so. I thought someone would. He went back to his word search, satisfied. I sat down across from him and I thought about Claire, who'd hidden notes inside her piano so that her music would have somewhere to go. I thought about Miriam, who'd kept a room sealed for 7 years because some grief is too precise to be rushed. I thought about Nadia's hand resting on the keys without pressing, testing the warmth. And I thought about my own mother who'd driven 40 minutes twice a week for 8 years so that Eli would have consistency, and who I hadn't called since last Thursday, and who picked up on the first ring every single time. I got up from the table. I called her from the kitchen, standing at the window watching the streetlight come on in the front yard. She answered on the first ring. I told her I just wanted to say thank you for all of it. Every Monday, every Thursday, every time. She laughed a little, the way she does when I surprise her. Said, "Baby, you don't have to thank me for that." I know I don't have to. That's not why I called. There are people still on the other end of the line, still picking up, still waiting for us to say the thing we keep meaning to say. We don't always know how long we have. We don't always know when the quiet will grow long enough to become permanent. If there's a call you've been putting off, an apology, a thank you, and I love you to someone who already knows it but hasn't heard it in too long, I hope you'll make it tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight, while the line is still open and the person on the other end is still there to hear it. Because some silences, once they start, don't stop. And some things need to be said out loud before they can be real.